Freedom requires virtue, virtue requires faith, and faith requires freedom. A triangle with no shortcuts. Revolution by Eric Metaxas. Audiobook summary and review by StoryShots. Most people assume the American Revolution was a tax revolt that got out of hand. It was not even close. That is the argument at the center of Revolution, the Birth of the Greatest Nation in the History of the World, by Eric Metaxas, who traces America's founding not to Parliament's ledgers, but to a courtroom argument, a religious awakening, and a conviction that rights come from God, not kings. The Revolution before the Revolution. Most classrooms teach 1776 as the starting gun. It was closer to the finish line. Decades before Lexington and Concord, colonial Americans lived through a spiritual upheaval called the Great Awakening, a wave of preaching that taught farmers and tradesmen to read scripture for themselves and question any authority, religious or royal, that claimed power over their conscience. John Adams later called this the Revolution before the Revolution. If liberty in America started as a spiritual idea before it became a political one, the version of the founding you learned in school skipped its first and most important chapter. That reframes everything that follows. Once ordinary colonists believed their rights came from God rather than government, no tax repeal was ever going to satisfy them again. The courtroom speech nobody remembers. In February of 1761, a Massachusetts lawyer named James Otis, Jr. stood in a Boston courtroom to argue against the writs of assistance, documents that let customs officers search any colonist's home without cause. Otis lost the case. He won something bigger. His argument framed the writs as a violation of rights given by God, not granted by government. And a young attorney in the audience named John Adams walked out, calling it the opening scene of the Revolution. Rights that come from God rather than government leave no room for compromise once government refuses to recognize the difference. That standoff took 15 more years and a war to resolve. A legal argument does not defeat an empire on its own. What does is a mechanism the founders built, one that neither the French nor the Bolshevik revolutionaries ever figured out. The golden triangle that made America survive. Here is the mechanism. Call it the golden triangle of freedom. Freedom requires virtue, virtue requires faith, and faith requires freedom. Every other revolution in history that tried to seize liberty without that triangle intact, France, Russia, collapsed into terror or tyranny within a generation. America did not, because Washington's generation believed self-government only works among a people who restrain themselves without being forced to. A nation that has to be policed into decency was never actually free to begin with. This is not just a lesson about 1776. It raises the uncomfortable question of what happens to a free country once the faith and virtue holding up the triangle start to erode. If this changed how you think about America's founding, someone in your life who loves history probably needs to hear it too. Final summary. This summary of Revolution threads together the spiritual awakening that preceded the war, the courtroom moment that gave it language, and the golden triangle that let it survive victory, into one thread. America's liberty was never just political. The full summary of Revolution digs into what this trailer only touched: Samuel Adams's overlooked role as what Metaxas calls the true father of the Revolution, the frozen desperation of Valley Forge, and Benedict Arnold's betrayal and what it nearly cost the cause. It is essential listening for anyone questioning what today's cultural battles have to do with 1776. We are putting together the full Revolution summary right now, complete with an infographic and animated video. Follow the book in the StoryShots app to get it the moment it's ready.